wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood. And today we are talking about becoming a mother and really looking at the journey and transition into motherhood, which is such a beautiful, harrowing, scary, wonderful, exciting time for so many women.
What a spectrum.
Yes, and it really is a spectrum. I think there's so much anticipation there, and I think for so many women that whole thing doesn't get considered, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of focus on the external process of becoming a mother and, you know, setting up the room and having that baby. And
there's a lot of focus on the birth, even though we've had we refer back to our 2 birth podcasts to learn more about birth itself, because I feel like there's a focus on birth, but not really for the birth process.
Yes.
Just the focus on the outcome of the baby.
The outcome of the baby.
Yeah. And then there isn't much after that, is there?
No. And I distinctly remember back to my beginning a mother journey, and I really had unpacked it a lot and still was not ready for it. I don't know how ready anyone really is for it.
I don't think they ever are.
No. And I remember somebody saying to me, oh my gosh, like, you know, the birth was fine, but oh my God, the last 6 weeks have been the worst of my life. You know, and so then, you know, so just as much as some women might fear birth, other women fear bringing the baby home, and what the hell do you do with it, and who are you?
And the sleepless nights.
The sleepless nights and, you know, the expectations of other people on you, you know, setting those boundaries and being comfortable with the boundaries that you might have around your family at that time.
To breastfeed, to not breastfeed.
Yeah. You know, who's going to get up to the baby, you know, how much do you want from your partner or, you know, your support network. And we actually got a couple of questions on the Facebook page around the transition into motherhood and how we can bring more awareness and intention to that, to I guess prepare yourselves as much as possible for how that journey is going to go. And I think it's so important to consider this aspect of it, and to be open to how it unfolds, because ultimately we don't know the baby we're going to have. And you know, you could get a great sleeper, or you could get one who keeps you up most of the night. And it's really about who you are in the process and who you have around you to support yourself going through that. I
say that to all my clients. You can read all of the books. And it's not that I'm saying don't, because I think it's a great idea to read the spectrum that's out there.
Yes.
Before you figure out, you check it with your head and you check it with your heart and you see what feels best for you. Read the spectrum. Don't just sit in one corner of parenting, I don't think. But the thing is, you can't actually make those choices until you know who the individual is that enters your lives.
Yes.
It's really easy to make these assumptions. Like, I'm even going to say, my first baby was my journey into natural parenting. So I went through very much the mainstream practices of self-settling and whatever before I found what sat more comfortably for me and for him. And then by the time I had my second child, it was a fully attachment experience. I went from one extreme to the other, because I saw out of the first experience what I considered to be negative outcomes, and I was like, I'm doing the total opposite, and it's going to be so attached and so loved up, this child's going to blossom. And that's totally what happened, but that's who she is and still is. She's still the child at nearly 8 that wants cuddles and she wants so much intimacy. And then I had my third child and I had moved into aware parenting and thought, yes, this time I'm going to co-sleep and I'm going to, you know, do all of these things that I didn't do with my attachment parenting. I'd found some things I wasn't happy with on that journey. And my third baby didn't want to co-sleep and only ever slept when I put her in her cot at night, which I can't tell you the weeks of tears that I had to my midwife about that, because I'm like, what?
Yes.
What is going on here? I'm not the mum that wraps my baby and puts it in a cot. And she very, very gently said to me, yeah, you know, maybe she's just the individual that likes more space. And I just went, okay. And as soon as I did that, the cot was still in my room, but as soon as I made that process of wrapping and putting her in the cot, she just slept. Which I had spent so many years as a doula, given my first 2 experiences, convinced that there was no babies that did that.
And extolling the benefits of co-sleeping and, you know.
Exactly right. And here I was, which is actually kind of perfect, isn't it?
Yeah.
That this mirror was shown to me. I can't even remember how I got onto that.
No, but I love that, because that's what it is. You know, you can go into it with such firm expectations of how you're going to be.
Oh, that's right, the individual.
Yeah.
Totally depends on the individual you get out of the other side of that birth, because they're not just, in inverted commas, collectively babies. They are absolutely individuals. And I have had mums even say to me, oh, you know, that baby didn't come out of me until it was the very last second I was about to have a Caesar. And that's still like that. They're still 14 and they wait till the very last second before they do whatever it is. Mums seem to intimately know the nature of their child and can make those connections even back from day dot. So I know there's this huge nurture-nature debate, but I do believe there's so much nature to start off with, and the nurture just probably amplifies or decreases certain aspects of what they already are.
Yeah. And they are so much you and where you are at, because they are responding to you. I mean, that mother-baby dyad is so intimately linked. You cannot pull it apart, really, because the baby is, you know, reflecting your own anxieties a lot of the time. I mean, I look back to my journey with Hugo, and I was, you know, really had my head in every book, and almost I feel like didn't even trust myself, even though I did with the birth and all that kind of stuff. But beyond that, I was like, what the hell do I do? You know, and I wonder how much his lack of not sleeping and really not settling was me playing out. You know, was how much was I influencing that? And I don't say that from any place of blame at all. I say it from a place of inquiry and curiosity now. And so while we say sort of, you know, wait and see, in some ways, the baby that you have, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that with birth. You know, like
not birth at all. But it is still in parenting, as it is in birth, about getting your toolkit,
yes, and
choosing your support network and how that's going to function prior to the event. So the toolkit is no good. This was my struggle with my first child. Is none of my friends had kids by that stage of the circle that we were in at that stage. And so if you haven't grown up with kids, which predominantly none of us have, we don't have big families that we've grown up around our sisters that are already having babies by the time we're 12. We don't kind of have that anymore.
Yeah.
So we come to being mothers ourselves, and we've had no direct experience of mothering or of babies. So we have no toolkit, and we only have a vague reference of maybe how we were brought up and probably the input that our mum and our mother-in-law have based on what they remember. And I think that it's often a remembering.
Memory.
Yes, isn't it? So it's really, you've got to expand your toolkit so that when a problem arises or the thing happens, you're not left going, what the fuck do I do now? You've actually got a kit that you can open that box of and go, okay, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try that and I'm going to try this until I find the thing that works for me and works for my baby.
I love that. And so that's absolutely key, is to have a wide range of resources, and also identify in your life who I suppose you like as perhaps a role model in some senses. You know, who around you have you admired their parenting style or the way in which they engage with their baby or the attitude in which they bring to their mothering, and how can you awaken part of that in your own journey, and also as you know, when you are pregnant or when you're thinking about pregnancy, thinking about, you know, that longer term, you know, what do you need to put in place? Like in my case, I hadn't really seen breastfeeding before and hadn't really experienced it around me. So I sought out the information that I needed. You know, my husband and I went off to a breastfeeding education seminar and learned.
The Australian Breastfeeding Association's breastfeeding seminar is a must do for any parent of first-time parent. It's
brilliant. And people, you know, often go, oh, it's okay, you know, the hospital, you know, teaches you this stuff. The hospital does not teach you that stuff.
No, the lactation is very different. Lactation teaching are very different and often come from not necessarily the World Health Organization's recommendations either. And the Breastfeeding Association classes, you're surrounded by women who have breastfed themselves, who are intimately still involved in breastfeeding issues. They have very, very fantastic resources for healing problems.
Yes.
And you also in that class get to actually witness breastfeeding. So they always have a mum and baby there who show you what attachment looks like, which is fantastic to actually have such a physical representation of. And it gives you a point of reference. They have a 24-hour, 7 days a week helpline that you can call, and it connects you with any one of their breastfeeding counsellors. The Dandenong office has a drop-in office every Wednesday where if you're having any issues, you've had a shit night, there's something's not going right, you've got cracked nipples, whatever it is. Just go and jump in there. It's a group of women who sit there with all the resources and a room full of toys and cups of tea, and they will nourish you and help you on your journey.
And it's, you know, you don't have to pay anything. It's all there. They are at the end of the phone. They are volunteers, and they're amazing. And so that's just off the bat straight away. Yes. You know, if breastfeeding is your intention, set it up like it is.
Yeah,
you know, it's not something that you also just wait and see with.
Like in birth, so true.
Because sometimes it just doesn't happen.
And it's a learned skill.
It is. It's not saying that sometimes you hear of those beautiful journeys where it just happens, but even when it just happens, there's still teething problems on that journey, you know, like there's still, you'll still have questions. You'll still be up in the night wondering what, you know, sleep deprived, why is this not working? Having those resources. And in my case, I also had a friend who was a midwife who came around and checked every couple of days how it was going. You know, not everyone can have that, but who else in your circle can you call on?
How can you resource yourself to have that opportunity? The Australian Breastfeeding Association is a fantastic resource.
They're brilliant. And there's local drop-in centres even beyond just the Dandenong one. There's one in every state of Australia, in every town
and play
region.
groups or groups that they meet every week and they discuss a different topic, and they have lactation consultants there ready to help you as well. And it's in a community of women who have babies probably of similar ages, and having a community around you automatically makes a really big difference. The other thing I want to talk about when we're talking about intention into parenthood is actually a blessing way.
Yes, I love this concept, and I'm so doing this next time.
I know.
Take it away. I want to tell everyone about it.
So when I had my first baby, I did the baby shower.
Yes.
Which is what everybody does. And it's exciting because you get all these presents and, you know, sometimes you do silly games, and it's almost like the hen's kind of version of having a baby, isn't it? But it kind of left me feeling a little bit holy. Yeah, you know, we did it. It was fun and la-di-da. And when I had my second child, I was like, oh, it's my second child. I don't need that fuss. I kind of think deep down there was a worthiness thing. I'm not worthy of that honouring or that fussing.
Yes.
You know, which I think is a common theme for mums, particularly if it's second or subsequent children. And then after my daughter, I became a doula. And so then I was witness to this incredible spectrum of birth and parenting journeys and all of the resources and tools that are out there. And I came across the Blessing Way, which then I went to so many, and I've run a couple along the way, and they are just the most extraordinary version. Instead of having a baby shower that focuses on the baby or the outcome, the Blessing Way focuses on blessing the way for this mother. And there's a new mother born every time you have a child. It's not only the first time you move from maiden to mother do you have, you know, this rite of passage. Every single time you have another child, you're birthing a new version of you, a new version of the woman, a new version of the mother. And, you know, it's a new journey, and that is worthy of honouring that rite of passage. And so the Blessing Way focuses on the mother. It focuses on honouring her as who she is, honouring her journey of birth that's about to happen, and offering a support network that she can call on once she's had this baby. So Blessing Ways come in, there's many, many, many different ways that you can do it. And I would love to do even another podcast on that, or have a look, just have a Google and you'll find all sorts of amazing, amazing stuff. I'll tell you about my Blessing Way that I had with my third baby to give you an idea. So I called in my sister and probably 2 or 3 other friends, and I said very specifically, this is the kind of thing I want. Can you help me do it? And so my sister is amazing at creating beautiful spaces. So she organised my invites, which were just decadent and beautiful. I was really embodying that, you know, priestess, goddess kind of archetype. By then I was ready and felt worthy enough to be honoured. And so it was much easier to allow that pleasure when you're sitting there, you know? Yeah. So she made the most beautiful invites, and it was this kind of Moroccan looking gold leaf. Oh, amazing. And they organised a beeswax candle. It was the mother candle that when everybody entered, she had these beautiful pure wool, different coloured strings, and everybody tied a string on that represented a wish or something that they'd done to this mother candle. They got spritzed with a beautiful cleansing essential oil kind of aura cleansing blend that was just beautiful. And they walked into this room that she had decorated that just looked like the inside of a goddess tent. It was just unbelievable. It was full of candlelight and things hanging off the ceiling and scarves and things strewn everywhere over pillows. It was amazing. My whole lounge room was completely transformed and smelt amazing. And I had a henna tattoo. So Brie, who we interviewed last week, was my doula. And my sister had designed it, and then she henna tattooed my belly, and I had this amazing peacock kind of design on my belly, which was just extraordinary. And that was a real process of letting go for me, because I don't have the perfect body. I still have a few of those hang-ups. I had stretch marks, and to allow myself to be nurtured and loved in that way of honouring my body and my process, and transforming that concept of those scars being scarring as opposed to being gifts or honouring. Even that, to be touched in areas that you don't necessarily feel comfortable
and bearing yourself in that way.
Yes.
You know, bearing that part of yourself that you so often hide away.
Yes. So it was amazing. So I did that, and my sister had made me this amazing headpiece. So as it was starting and everybody was arriving, I walked out and I had, you know, this belly that had this amazing design on it and this gold headpiece, and I felt absolutely like a goddess, which was an amazing experience, because when do you ever allow yourself to feel like that?
Yeah.
And the excitement of the women around me when they saw that was just, it was beautiful. And they walked into that space and it was like instantly everybody's energy just dropped into it. They matched that vibration.
They were there because that space was being held, wasn't it?
And I'm talking about some very mainstream women here. I have a beautiful group of friends that are from so many areas of my life, that some are really hippie, but some are really not. You know, they have never experienced a women's circle. They've never, you know, gone very deep. And so I was not totally sure how this space was going to go. And instead what came out of it was, when you set intention and you hold a circle and a space, these women, all of them who didn't know each other, who were from different walks of life, just sat in it. And it was amazing. They all walked out of that going, oh my God, I feel amazing. I didn't know this. You could do this.
Wow.
I didn't know I could feel like this, you know. And so we all sat in circle. So everyone brought a cushion. And we lit the candles, which there was an honouring process with that. One of my friends led us through, who was a yoga teacher, led us through a meditation. And then we went around the circle, and they had all brought a crystal for my birth space for me to carry with me wherever it was I was going to have birth. And they all said what it was that I meant to them or that I had brought to their lives, and offered me this gift that they had brought. And I can't tell you, by the second woman, everyone in that room was crying. It was absolute heaven on earth to literally be so allowing of receiving those compliments and those external versions of myself, that it was, I don't even know what it was. It filled my soul. And to be on the point of birth with a full soul is such a gift.
That is beautiful. And I not only that, but that concept of what your baby is feeling
true.
with you feeling like that. Like, that is, what a way to welcome them in.
Yes.
You know, and transition yourself into that role of holding them in that such a, you know, that really nurturing time.
Yeah.
It's just...
And then we did, and I had another beautiful friend who led us through a fear burning ceremony. So everybody had an opportunity to write down a fear that they were holding on to, that they wanted to let go of, and they had the choice to speak that or not. In either case, we held that space and they would burn it. Everyone bar two spoke it, and the other two that didn't, was completely fine, and they just said it internally. And that was so healing. The vulnerability and the connection that comes through vulnerability was just extraordinary. And it allowed me, as the woman giving birth, to be held by my community of women in releasing the fears that I was holding on to about death, because I'd had the miscarriage before this pregnancy.
Yeah.
And I really didn't want to carry that into my birth. And it allowed me the opportunity to absolutely release that with, you know, big sobs, and just be held by a group of women who were just really feeling it, you know. It was beautiful. And every woman in that room had something deep that they wanted to let go of. And I felt honoured holding them in that process as well.
Yeah, it was just as much for them as it was for you.
It was. It was amazing. And then we had a break, and all of the women there had a henna tattoo on their wrist, which would have stayed on their wrist roughly until the time I would have given birth. And every time they looked at that, we'd offered that perhaps they might have an intentional thought about offering blessings or something for me and my baby. We had sewn up some birth flags. So they were just strips of like calico, and I had fabric markers, and everybody wrote a birth affirmation on this flag for me that we strung up wherever I was going to give birth. And again, if I wasn't going to be at home, all of these things were going to be easy to transform my birth space in a hospital. So this was also our thought behind it.
Yeah.
The other thing is I wanted a baby quilt, and so I had asked everybody to pre this event, send a piece of fabric to my friend who was making the quilt. And so every single woman that was there had sent a piece of fabric to my friend, and my friend had made this amazing quilt that was just full of all of the fabrics from all of the women that were there. Some had stories and some they just loved the pictures of, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And I had fabric markers again, and everyone wrote a blessing for the baby on the back of that quilt.
Gorgeous.
Oh, it was amazing. And then we ate and we came back in and we had another meditation. I think it might have been a bell meditation with my yoga teacher friend again, and the circle was closed. And the whole thing went for probably 2.5 hours. But we all floated out of there like absolute goddess-worthy, took that home to our families, that rippled out, you know.
Yeah.
And that is also the intent that we set up for our retreats, is that holding of space where women walk out of there just blissed out, and that transforms the life that they're living even currently. So a blessing way really allows an energy, if you're having a home birth, to stay in a house that baby's going to be born into, which is absolute heaven. It allows a group of women to really come together to offer the love and support that they want to give and don't know how to give to the woman who's about to enter this journey. This woman has the chance to receive honouring like she has probably never received in her life before, and healing through tears, most likely. And the other thing that we've done at every blessing way I've ever been at is a meal tree. So one of my friends was in charge of that, and during the break she didn't even have to ask anyone. Everyone came up to her and they filled out their name on a day. And so I can't tell you, I chose, instead of having a meal every day, I chose to have a meal every second day. So every second day for the first 6 weeks of my child's life, I had someone bringing food for my whole family, probably staying to get me a cup of tea and a chat, and doing one cleaning thing in my house.
That is
for 6
so amazing.
weeks. So my husband really didn't even have to have much time off work. He kind of had days off in between, because every second day I had someone there with me, which is amazing.
It's really, that's the village, isn't it?
That's what I mean.
So,
create the village.
Yes.
There's not a lack if you're willing to open up to receiving.
And that's the challenge that so many people, and women particularly, have a hard time with, is the receiving.
Isn't it?
It's the saying yes.
The vulnerability.
Because we feel like we're putting other people out, and we can't, then we have, that we should really say no because we should have it covered. You know,
I know.
there's a massive...
It makes me so sad, because when we really are vulnerable enough to receive that help, them, because we know ourselves, we want to love up and give what we have to offer to our friends, and we just sometimes sit there waiting, just I'll help you, just let me. And the fact that they don't is almost, probably hurts them, but it also kind of hurts that person that's being rejected in a way. So being able to just be open enough to say, I recognise I'm going to need help, and for me to be the best mother that I can be, I don't need help with the baby necessarily, I need help with me.
Yes.
And I say that to all of my clients and any grandparents I come across, is the best way to help a new mum is to feed and help the parents, so that they can be the best parents they can be to their child.
Yeah. It's not the endless sets of clothing or, you know, all those kinds of things for the baby. It's really
the nourishing of the parents, so they have the fullest, most amazing capacity to give what potentially might seem endlessly to this little person, until that season of getting used to the new world kind of peters off. Yeah.
I just love that story. I've heard that story a number of times, and every time I just love it. It's just magical.
It is magical. And I'm going to post some photos on our Facebook page from my blessing way, I think, because even just looking at the images, it makes you go, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that existed.
That it's even possible.
And I'm talking about most of you guys know, very mainstream women, just women just like you and me.
Yeah.
Just living our lives, you know, taking our kids to school. But we offer this one little slice of life that just calls to our inner goddess. And then when women jump on that, oh my goodness, miracles occur.
And it opens a space for that vulnerability, you know, that we are so often good at putting up the walls.
Connection only comes through vulnerability.
Yes. Because
women don't connect unless they're first willing to be vulnerable, which is amazing.
And that's the key. And that's the key and once you overcome that resistance to going into that vulnerability, that's where the healing occurs. That's where the fullness of your heart is able to be experienced, isn't it?
So true. So true. So when we're thinking about new motherhood, let's just recap. do read all of the books.
Yes.
Do role model off the parents that you love or that the children you think are amazing out of a particular, family, and pick out what it is that that toolkit is that seems similar across those parents that you really admire. And set yourself up really well for that first 6 to 8 weeks. Ask for support. Have a roster system. Recognise that you need nourishing so that you can be the best version of you. Because if you're strung out, you haven't got much left to give.
No. And your baby's going to ask for a lot. They need a lot. That's just a big one. And even if you can get a pre-cook meals and freeze them to make up for whenever anyone else can't help out. But certainly setting up that village network is a big one.
Oh, it is absolutely. The women that I have in my life that I have intentionally, in a way, put there by creating these opportunities through playgroup, through co-op, through school, through, these opportunities of connection through women's circles. They are my community, and those women have saved my soul 100 times over. I dearly love my husband, but he doesn't save my soul the way that those women have.
It's a different space to be held, that women coming together.
Yes, it is.
That connection, that vulnerability, that journey of motherhood.
Yes.
That is not something that husbands ever really feel that they can enter.
Yeah.
They're there, but they're more of an observing role. They don't quite understand. There's something about that.
The deepness.
The depth that's not really what resonates so strongly for them, nor are they interested in, and that's okay. So, and it's, I think perhaps
where else do you get that?
And it's about going looking for that.
So maybe let's talk a little bit about what happens when you're having maybe too much input from those around you.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we've all experienced that. I certainly have. Are you feeding that baby again? Really? Don't you think that's dangerous that you're sleeping with your baby?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. There's probably a myriad. What other ones have you heard? Carrying your baby. Damn it. I had one woman rock up to me in the supermarket one day. I had my baby in a sling. Don't you carry it enough?
Because she knows you and she sees you all the time.
I don't know. I was like, no. What do you even say to that? But there's so much public opinion, I think.
There is.
As soon as there's a witnessing of meeting a child's needs possibly above your own, of deep connection, there's almost a ribbing there. And that's generally when the comments are going to fly out.
Yeah, and I think anyone will challenge something that's outside their value system too. Like if it's challenging to what they would do, then we often will think it's wrong. And some people are quite comfortable to voice that, and, of course, everyone's an expert. Anyone who's ever had a baby before you is clearly an expert and will probably tell you that.
Definitely.
Family, friends, people will tell you not to, baby must be tired, it's doing this, don't spoil the baby, or, all of this kind of stuff. And so much of all that advice is their own stuff.
It is their own stuff.
Which is, that's human nature. That's how we work. But
so did you get that as a young mum?
Funnily enough, I don't feel like I got it that much. And I don't know why that is. I mean, I got it from my mum because my mum, I was pretty, firm about what I wanted. And so, of course, I'm going to attract a bit of a challenge. And my mum felt a little bit challenged by some of it. And I also, interestingly enough, and, that's quite funny now that I look back on it, I was put in a mother's group of very mainstream mothers with very mainstream choices, and I felt really uncomfortable and challenged because mine were all very, very different. But ultimately that led me to seek a tribe where I felt more held in my choices and more able to explore those more fully, still while keeping that foot in that other group to help me get the perspective that I often needed and that I now see I needed, because I had become quite probably one-eyed in the way that I wanted to do things, which, you suggested that was your experience totally. Too, we kind of, and we often, if we get quite firm on our values, we'll look for things to support them, and we'll, anything that challenges them we'll see as wrong. And that's definitely, I think, what creates a lot of the division in early motherhood and in choices around sleep. I mean, you'll see if you go into any, parenting group, the opinions on sleep, it's almost like one of those big taboos. Like, you just don't talk about it because there's, some people will choose, controlled crying method. Others will choose, co-sleeping, and it's kind of these two opposite camps. And where do you fit? And this person's saying this thing, and this person's saying this thing, and so much of it, again, calls you back into yourself. What feels right?
And that's what I think. That's what I say to all of my clients. Check whatever information you get. It doesn't matter where it's come from. With your head, does it make sense to you?
Yes.
And then with your heart. And this is the part that we often don't venture down to, because we live so much in the intellectual that if it makes sense, or Susie Joe says, if I don't do it this way, I'm going to have to do it this way forever.
Yes.
That we don't ever sit back into our heart space. And I think it's hard, particularly for first-time mums, to see the seasons of a baby's development.
And it can you can so easily feel like this is it forever. Like
yes.
This
and if I do this, if I give in now, I'm making a rod for my own back later.
That's a classic.
And I just really want to say that's total bullshit.
Yes.
I can tell you as a parent who's done every spectrum of parenting that it doesn't matter what you do.
No.
They all grow out of it, or you change it in what can be overnight when it no longer serves you.
That's exactly
so
right.
nothing is ever set in concrete. I think the thing is, I always keep coming back to, and this is what I'm big on, is for me, the blissful journey into parenting is about how well, and I mean that in terms of how nourished and how joyous or happy or content is that mother. So if something's serving the mother, it doesn't matter if you think it's the easier choice to breastfeed your baby to sleep as opposed to sitting up and patting it till it goes to sleep.
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't care what it is. If you are feeling really content and happy and well-rounded, that's the choice to make. That's sitting in your heart space. That pull, if you're wanting, your head saying leave your baby, but your heart's going, just pick it up. Listen to your heart. Your heart is your intuition. It's your guiding post. It's your connection to your child.
Yes.
And whatever your head is telling you is happening now, it won't be happening in another week. It won't be happening in another month. And it certainly won't be happening in another year. And look, I just want to tell you, if you're even having thoughts about this, my second child, fully attachment parented, co-slept, never put her down in a cot or a bed. I wore her every second of every minute of every day. I fed her every time she cried. I fed her to sleep. I fed her when she fed her, booby baby, big time. By the time she was 1, she's sleeping in her own bed through the night.
Yes.
You have never met, and Bridget knows it, you've never met a more... she's that real theatrical type. She's so content in who she is that she so easily shares that with the world. But, she made all of those transitions to that without me having to force her to necessarily do anything.
Because that's a big, I think, misconception too, is this idea that you need to, start with the end in mind with a baby, with a newborn baby, and to force this independence, from very early on, lest they manipulate you or become too dependent. And, we know there's so much information now on building secure attachment. And in fact, when you have a secure base, for which the child to grow from, then they flourish out in the world. They actually can end up being more independent because they're not having to seek. They have a stronger sense of self because
there's no anxiety around, am I okay, am I not okay, is this okay, what's mum think? They've kind of lost that because they're so in touch with who they are, which is even what we were talking about with Brie and love bombing last week, was tuning back into their bodies, into their intuition of who are they. And that does start with babyhood, and it starts with the role modelling as a mother. How much am I willing to listen to my own intuition, my own heart space that's calling me one way or another? So, and I know that you were really saying your journey, even on the attachment parenting spectrum, was so much about the theoretical and the head space.
Yeah.
So did you at some point sit back in that heart space, or do you feel like you were also on an intellectual level on another journey?
No, I think for me, I think I tend to sit in the, it's funny I say I think I tend to sit in my head a lot. And so for me, it was, read everything and then read it all some more and really intellectualize it. But then I did come back into that, okay, how does it really feel for me right now? How does this feel? And there was a time where I got to the point where I almost began to resent attachment parenting because I felt that it was almost depleting the mother at all costs for this concept of this baby being everything. And that's when I really found aware parenting, which is really the concept of bringing awareness to not only your baby's needs but your own needs as a mother, and what's going on for you is ultimately in some ways what's reflecting back to you and your baby. So what do you need to give yourself and fill your cup with so you can be more present for your child? And that was a real kind of like light bulb moment for me, where I really saw that oh wow, so I don't need to I'm not at the mercy of this baby or this child, that in fact how is what's happening here making me feel?
That's what I always say to my clients. It's working till it's no longer working for you.
Yes.
So there's a point when, this is what I'm saying with follow your bliss and follow your joy. Parenting really, when it's really at its core, it can totally be that experience of bliss and joy. Yes, of course, there's shit and we talk about that and we peel back the layers in so many of our podcasts.
That's right.
But as a general concept, whatever is happening, it doesn't matter if it's sleep or whatever, is if you're really feeling good about it, just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Until at some point you go, this is no longer working for me.
Yeah.
And I notice that even with mums that say, oh, I'm still breastfeeding him 5 times a night and I really, I know I should, but I really don't want to.
When you start shooting, that's when you need to start reviewing things. Because that's the point I got to. I was, and there was so much talk all the time, it's feed on demand, toddlers have all these needs too, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, nah, it's getting to the point where I'm feeling resentful of my child. And that is not a good place from which to continue to breastfeed. And so I night weaned him, and then I decided that, no, okay, we're just going to feed in these 2 times in the day. And I'll hear any of your, grievances about that. I'll hear any feelings that are coming out for you. But for mummy to, feel good in myself, this is what I need to do.
And then that parenting effect ripples out. So that's what I mean. You keep doing what you're doing until you go, there's a point where I'm not. And I hear what you're saying with the shooting, but I also think that's a sign to me that those mums aren't ready yet.
Yeah.
So the thing is, when they're really ready, they go, that's it, I'm fucking over this. Yeah. And tonight I'm willing to sacrifice sleep for more sleep the next night.
That's it.
And they get to that point where they're like, that's it, I'm done. It's time to change.
Yeah.
And those babies, they change overnight.
That's true, because I think your child is so clever in that they can sense where you're at. And if you're not quite there yet, they know that, But when you're firm and you're ready, it almost becomes, in some ways, parts of it effortless. You'll often hear parents say, oh, they just responded so well to that. I wasn't expecting that. But it's almost because they got to that point of knowing that this is what the change that they wanted to make, and they're firm with it.
Yes.
That the child's just responded to that.
And the key is also what you touched on before with aware parenting is, whilst you're offering changes in their life, you're also offering the opportunity to hear their grievances with that, to hear their pain, their suffering, their anger. And so you're saying, holding that space. So when they're crying, I'm not putting the dummy in or offering food or distraction. I'm going to sit there looking at them in their eyes, holding their bodies. So I know, I really hear that you're really upset about that.
Yeah.
I really hear that you're angry at mummy. I really hear that you really want that milk now. It's listening to that space that then creates the healing for them to move through, as opposed to them sucking it down.
And then they're not holding on to it anymore. They've felt it, they've sat in it for a minute, and they're shifting it.
Yeah.
As opposed to them then operating like we talked about with Brie in the last Life Bombing podcast. They're not operating from that space of, lack or fear or anxiety. They've felt what that feels like, moved through it, and are ready to go with you in this new direction.
Yeah, totally.
I think we could talk about new motherhood for ages, but we might wind it up there. Thank you for listening. And if this really touched you, if you are, on the journey of becoming a mother, perhaps you're pregnant, please, either PM us or kind of share on the Facebook page what else, what the journey means for you. What questions do you have around that transition? Because I think so often women who are in the mainstream system, and they're going to see their obstetrician, or they're going to see those mainstream care network, there's often all these questions that are left unanswered around the emotional journey into motherhood.
Or even like birth choices they don't know. You haven't got choices if you don't know what your choices are.
That's it. Exactly right.
So really hoping this next week that you can take with you a little bit of intuition, listening to your heart, but also checking it with your head, but not before you've listened to your heart again.
Yeah.
We really hope that you're able to do that this week. So please connect with us, suburbansandcastles.com for Bridget. And Bridget, your movie coming up is?
Yeah, so in October we've got a film called The Empowerment Project, which is all about celebrating ordinary women doing extraordinary things.
I'm excited, can't wait.
Which is fantastic for, I guess, the whole theme of our podcast. And it's really that idea of what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail.
Yes.
So that's coming up on the 14th of October.
So you can book at that at suburbansandcastles.com. And I'm Julie Tenner if you would like to connect with me on naturopathicbirth.com.au. And certainly please rate us on iTunes, share our podcast if they're speaking to you, and connect with us on facebook.com/nourishingthemother. And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on the mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.